As you take your first breath this morning, a startling realization settles in. Nothing will ever be the same. The air feels heavier, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to notice what has shifted beneath the surface. You sit up, the sheets tangled around your legs, and for a moment you can't quite place what's wrong. The room is unchanged, sunlight slanting through the blinds, the familiar hum of distant traffic, yet something in the fabric of reality has twisted, ever so slightly, and you sense it in your bones. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every act of kindness, every well-intentioned gesture, every moment you tried to do the right thing, had somehow led to pain, confusion, or even disaster. Picture yourself opening your eyes to a world where the very things you believed would heal, unite, or uplift have instead sown division, resentment, or chaos. You reach for your phone, scrolling through messages, headlines, memories, each one a testament to the strange, unsettling truth. Good intentions, those sacred seeds of hope and virtue, have blossomed into something unrecognizable, even monstrous. You find yourself standing at the edge of a new reality, the truth dawning on you all at once. The path to hell is not only paved with good intentions, it is built, brick, by people who wanted nothing more than to do good. Suddenly, you're faced with a moment that makes you question everything you thought you knew about morality, about progress, about the very nature of being human. How could this be? How could the purest motives, the noblest dreams become the architects of suffering? You remember the stories you were told as a child, tales of heroes and villains, of right and wrong, of choices that shaped destinies. You were taught that to wish well, to act with compassion, to strive for justice was to walk the righteous path. But now, as you stare into the mirror, searching your own eyes for answers, you see the shadow of doubt flicker behind your reflection. What if the line between good and evil is not a boundary, but a Mobius strip, twisting, looping, returning you to the place you least expect? The paradox gnaws at you. Why do the best of intentions so often lead to the worst of outcomes? Why does the desire to help sometimes wound more deeply than indifference? Why do efforts to unite so frequently divide? And why does the pursuit of happiness so often end in sorrow? You think of the friend you tried to save, only to push them further away. The cause you championed, only to watch it fracture the community you loved. The apology you offered, only to reopen old wounds. Each memory is a shard of glass, reflecting a different angle of the same, impossible question. You feel the weight of history pressing down on you. Centuries of revolutions, reforms, and crusades, all born from the conviction that things could be better, that people could be better. Yet for every utopia dreamed, a dystopia realized. For every promise of liberation, a new form of bondage. The faces change, the slogans shift, but the pattern remains. The road to ruin is lined with the banners of the well-meaning. Is it fate? Is it human nature? Or is there something deeper, more insidious at work, a flaw in the very logic of intention itself? You recall the words of philosophers and poets, the warnings hidden in myth and scripture. Beware the gifts of the gods, beware the wishes that come true. Pandora's box, the Midas touch, the fall of Icarus, each a cautionary tale about the dangers of wanting too much, of believing too fervently in your own goodness. But this is not a story about ancient myths or distant tragedies. This is your story, unfolding in real time in the choices you make every day. You think of the parent who shields their child from every hardship, only to raise an adult unprepared for the world's cruelty. The leader who enacts sweeping reforms, only to unleash chaos and resentment. The lover who sacrifices everything, only to suffocate the one they adore. The activist who fights for justice, only to become the oppressor they once despised. You begin to see the outlines of a terrible symmetry. The more passionately you pursue the good, the more blind you become to the shadows you cast. The more certain you are of your righteousness, the less you question the consequences of your actions. The more you try to control the world, the more it slips through your fingers, like sand or smoke or time itself. And so you ask yourself, what is the true nature of intention? Is it a force for creation or for destruction? Is it possible to do good without causing harm? Or is every act, no matter how pure, tainted by the limits of your understanding? The unpredictability of the world, the hidden motives that lurk beneath the surface of your mind. You feel a chill run through you, as if the universe itself is whispering a secret you are not meant to hear. You remember the times you tried to help only to be met with anger or suspicion. The times you tried to fix things only to make them worse. The times you tried to love only to be left alone. Each failure is a lesson, but the lesson is never clear. Was it your fault? The world's? Or is there no one to blame? Only a pattern too complex to unravel. You look around, searching for reassurance, for someone to tell you that it's all a misunderstanding, that good intentions do matter, that the arc of the moral universe does bend toward justice, but the evidence is all around you. Broken systems, broken hearts, broken dreams. The more you try to make sense of it, the more the paradox deepens, until you feel as if you are drowning in questions with no answers. What if the very act of intending is a kind of hubris, a belief that you can predict, control, or shape the future according to your will? What if the world is too vast, too chaotic, too mysterious for your plans to ever succeed as you hope? What if every action is a stone thrown into a pond, the ripples spreading in ways you cannot foresee, touching lives you will never know? You think of the butterfly effect, the idea that a single flap of wings can set off a hurricane on the other side of the world. You think of unintended consequences, of the law of unforeseen results, of the stories that begin with hope and end in tragedy. You wonder if the problem is not with your intentions but with your expectations, your need for certainty, for control, for a guarantee that your actions will lead to the outcomes you desire. But even as you question, you cannot stop caring. You cannot stop wanting to help, to heal, to make things better. The impulse is too deep, too human, too essential to who you are, and so you are trapped, caught between the desire to do good and the fear of doing harm, between the hope that your actions matter and the dread that they do not. You close your eyes, trying to silence the storm of thoughts, but the questions only grow louder. What if the greatest danger is not in doing evil, but in doing good without understanding? What if the road to disaster is paved not with malice, but with ignorance, arrogance, or unchecked compassion? What if the true test of morality is not in your intentions, but in your willingness to face the consequences of your actions, to learn from your mistakes, to accept the limits of your power? As you open your eyes, the world seems both more beautiful and more terrifying than before. You see the fragility of every relationship, the complexity of every choice, the uncertainty that haunts every step you take. You realize that to live is to risk, to act is to gamble, to care is to invite pain as well as joy. And yet, you cannot turn away. The question remains, burning in your mind like a brand: why do good intentions so often lead to bad outcomes? What is the hidden force that twists your hopes into nightmares, your dreams into regrets? Is there a way to break the cycle, to find a path that honors both your desire to help and your fear of harm? You stand at the threshold of understanding, the door half open, the light spilling through. You sense that the answer lies not in easy platitudes or comforting lies, but in a deeper exploration of the human soul, a journey into the shadows where your motives, your fears, and your dreams collide. As you take your first step into this unknown territory, you feel the weight of the question pressing down on you, urging you forward, demanding that you look beyond the surface, beyond the stories you've been told, beyond the illusions you've clung to. The journey has begun, and there is no turning back. What if everything you thought you knew about goodness, about intention, about the very nature of right and wrong, is only the beginning of a much larger, more unsettling truth? What if the answers you seek will change not only how you act, but who you are? The paradox beckons, the tension mounts, and the next revelation waits just beyond the horizon. Will you dare to look deeper? Will you risk everything for the chance to understand? The choice is yours, and the journey is only beginning. You step forward, drawn by the gravity of the question that now pulses in your veins. The world outside your window is unchanged, yet you sense the invisible machinery grinding beneath the surface, ancient gears turning, unseen hands shaping the fate of every intention, every hope. You wonder, what is this hidden force that warps your best efforts, that turns light into shadow, that makes the purest motives so perilous? You search for answers, not in the noise of daily life, but in the silent corridors of your own mind. Here, in the dim-lit chambers of memory and desire, you begin to see the outlines of a deeper problem, one that has haunted humanity for centuries, whispered in the writings of philosophers, etched in the margins of sacred texts, encoded in the very structure of your psyche. You recall the words of Carl Jung, who spoke of the shadow, the dark, unacknowledged parts of yourself that you refuse to see. You remember how he warned that what you do not bring to consciousness will rule your life and you will call it fate. You realize that your intentions, no matter how noble, are never pure. They are shaped by fears you cannot name, wounds you have forgotten, needs you barely understand. Every act of kindness is shadowed by a secret longing for approval, for control, for redemption. Every attempt to help is haunted by the fear of your own helplessness. You think of Friedrich Nietzsche, who saw in the human heart a will to power, a restless, insatiable drive to impose order on chaos, to bend the world to your will. You remember his warning that those who fight monsters must take care not to become monsters themselves. You see how your desire to do good can become a mask for your need to dominate, to be right, to be seen as virtuous. You see how easily compassion curdles into condescension, how quickly justice becomes vengeance, how subtly love becomes possession. You feel the presence of Arthur Schopenhauer, whose bleak vision of human nature lingers like a cold wind. He spoke of the blind, striving will that animates all life, a force indifferent to suffering, heedless of consequence. You wonder if your intentions are merely the surface ripples of a deeper, darker current, a will that uses you as its instrument, that cares nothing for your ideals or your dreams. You remember Aldous Huxley, who saw in the pursuit of utopia the seeds of dystopia. He warned that the greatest horrors are often committed in the name of the highest ideals. You think of the revolutions that promised freedom and delivered terror, the reforms that promised equality and delivered oppression, the inventions that promised connection and delivered isolation. You see how every attempt to perfect the world is haunted by the specter of unintended consequences. You hear the voice of Jean-Paul Sartre, who insisted that you are condemned to be free, that every choice you make is an act of creation, a leap into the unknown. He spoke of the anguish that comes from knowing that you are responsible, not only for your actions, but for the world your actions help to create. You feel the weight of this freedom, the terror of this responsibility. You realize that your intentions are not shields against error, but invitations to risk, to failure, to regret. You sense the wisdom of Viktor Frankl, who survived the unspeakable and emerged with a simple, devastating insight that meaning is not given, but made. He taught that suffering is inevitable, but that you are free to choose your response. You see how your intentions are shaped by the meanings you assign to your life, by the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you are here to do. You see how easily these stories can become prisons, how quickly they can blind you to the suffering of others, to the complexity of the world. You begin to understand the problem is not that your intentions are bad, but that they are incomplete. They are fragments of a larger whole, shaped by forces you cannot see, driven by needs you cannot name. You are not a rational actor, calmly weighing costs and benefits, but a storm of conflicting desires, fears, and memories. You are a mystery to yourself, and your intentions are riddled with contradictions. You remember the times you acted out of love, only to discover resentment lurking beneath the surface. The times you tried to help, only to realize you were seeking validation. The times you fought for justice, only to find yourself consumed by anger. Each memory is a clue, a piece of the puzzle, a glimpse into the labyrinth of your own mind. You see how society encourages you to believe in the purity of your intentions, to trust your heart, to follow your dreams. You are told that if you mean well, you cannot go wrong. But you begin to suspect that this is a comforting lie, a way to avoid the hard work of self-examination, the painful process of confronting your own shadow. You realize that your intentions are shaped not only by your own psyche, but by the culture in which you live. You are taught to value certain virtues, to pursue certain goals, to fear certain outcomes. You are shaped by the stories you inherit, the myths you absorb, the expectations you internalize. You are told what it means to be good, to be successful, to be happy. But these definitions are not your own. They are the products of history, of power, of collective anxiety. You see how easily your intentions can be manipulated, How quickly your desire to do good can be harnessed for purposes you do not understand. You think of propaganda, of advertising, of social media campaigns that appeal to your sense of justice, your need for belonging, your fear of missing out. You see how your intentions can be weaponized, turned against you, used to justify actions you would otherwise condemn. You begin to sense the depth of the problem. It is not enough to mean well. It is not enough to want to help. You must ask yourself, what is driving me? What am I not seeing? Whose interests are being served? What are the possible consequences of my actions? Not just the ones I intend, but the ones I cannot foresee. You feel the tension mounting, the sense of urgency growing. You realize that the hidden problem is not out there, but in here, in the tangled web of your own mind, in the stories you tell yourself, in the shadows you refuse to face. You see that to do good is not a matter of intention alone, but of awareness, of humility, of courage. You wonder, is it possible to act without illusion, to help without harming, to love without controlling? Or are you doomed to repeat the same mistakes, to stumble blindly through the world, leaving a trail of unintended consequences in your wake? You remember the words of Jung. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You realize that the path to wisdom is not the denial of your shadow, but the integration of it. You must learn to see yourself clearly, to acknowledge your limitations, to accept the complexity of your motives. You think of Nietzsche's challenge to become who you are, not who you wish to be, not who others expect you to be, but who you truly are. Shadow and light, strength and weakness, hope and fear. You see that this is the hardest task of all, the one you have been avoiding, the one that holds the key to the paradox. You feel the pull of Schopenhauer's will, the restless energy that drives you forward, that refuses to be satisfied. You see that you cannot escape this force, but you can learn to recognize it, to channel it, to use it wisely. You can learn to act with awareness, to question your motives, to accept the limits of your power. You sense the warning in Huxley's vision, that the pursuit of perfection is a dangerous game, that the desire to save the world can become a form of tyranny. You realize that humility is not weakness, but strength. The strength to admit that you do not have all the answers, that you cannot control the future, that you are responsible for the consequences of your actions. You hear Sartre's call to freedom, to responsibility, to authenticity. You realize that you are not a victim of fate, but a creator of meaning. You can choose to act with awareness, to accept the risks, to learn from your mistakes. You can choose to face the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. You feel the hope in Frankl's message, that even in the darkest times, you can find meaning, you can choose your response, you can grow. You realize that the journey is not about achieving perfection, but about becoming more fully human, more aware, more compassionate, more courageous. The hidden problem is revealed. Your intentions are not enough. You must learn to see yourself clearly, to question your motives, to accept the complexity of the world. You must learn to act with humility, with awareness, with courage. Only then can you hope to break the cycle, to escape the trap, to find a path that honors both your desire to do good and your fear of doing harm. But the journey is not over. The consequences of your actions ripple outward, shaping the world in ways you cannot predict. The next step awaits. The next revelation beckons. Will you dare to look deeper? Will you face the unseen consequences of your intentions? The choice is yours, and the story continues. You move through your day, each action now tinged with a new awareness. The world feels sharper, as if the colors have deepened and the shadows have lengthened. You notice things you once ignored, the subtle tension in a friend's voice when you offer advice, the flicker of discomfort in a colleague's eyes when you try to help, the way your own heart tightens when your efforts are misunderstood. The hidden problem has been revealed, but its consequences are only beginning to unfold. You begin to see how the unseen consequences of good intentions shape not only your life, but the very fabric of society. They are the silent architects of reality, building invisible structures that guide your choices, your relationships, your sense of self. You realize that every intention, no matter how pure, is a stone cast into the vast ocean of existence, its ripples spreading far beyond your sight, touching shores you will never visit. You think of the parent who, out of love, shields their child from every hardship. The intention is pure, to protect, to nurture, to spare them pain. But the consequence is a child unprepared for the world's indifference, a soul fragile in the face of adversity. You see how the desire to help can become a prison, how the wish to heal can become a wound. You wonder how many times you have tried to save someone, only to rob them of the chance to save themselves. You remember the words of Daniel Kahneman, who revealed the labyrinth of cognitive biases that shape your thinking. You see how your intentions are filtered through the lens of confirmation bias, making you blind to evidence that contradicts your beliefs. You notice the halo effect, how your trust in someone's goodness blinds you to their flaws, or your faith in your own virtue blinds you to your mistakes. You recognize the sunk cost fallacy, how you cling to failed projects or relationships because you have invested so much, unable to admit that your intentions have led you astray. You realize that your brain is not a neutral observer, but a storyteller, weaving narratives that justify your actions, that protect your sense of self. You see how easily you mistake your intentions for reality, how quickly you rewrite history to cast yourself as the hero, the victim, the savior. You wonder how many times you have hurt others in the name of love, how many times you have justified cruelty in the name of justice, how many times you have ignored suffering because it did not fit your story. You feel the weight of cultural conditioning, the invisible scripts that guide your behavior. You see how society rewards certain intentions, ambition, self-sacrifice, loyalty, while punishing others, doubt, dissent, vulnerability. You notice how easily you internalize these values, how quickly you judge yourself and others by standards you did not choose. You realize that your intentions are not your own, but the product of 1,000 voices, 1,000,000 stories, a history you never lived. You think of the bystander effect, the way responsibility diffuses in a crowd. You remember times when you wanted to help, but waited for someone else to act. You see how your good intentions can become a shield against guilt, a way to absolve yourself of responsibility. You wonder how many tragedies unfold not because people are evil, but because they are waiting for someone else to do good. You recall the Stanford prison experiment, the way ordinary people became cruel when given power and a sense of purpose. You see how easily your intentions can be twisted by circumstance, how quickly you can become the villain in someone else's story. You realize that the line between good and evil is not a wall but a mirror, reflecting your own capacity for both. You feel the urgency of escape, the need to break free from the unseen trap. You sense that the greatest danger is not in your actions, but in your blindness to their consequences. You see how the pursuit of good can become a form of self-deception, a way to avoid the pain of uncertainty, the terror of not knowing. You realize that the world is too complex, too unpredictable, for your intentions to guarantee the outcomes you desire. You think of the law of unintended consequences, the way every action sets off a chain of events you cannot foresee. You remember the story of the cane toads in Australia, introduced to control pests but becoming a plague themselves. You see how every solution creates new problems, how every attempt to fix the world leaves it more tangled than before. You wonder if the very idea of control is an illusion, a comforting story you tell yourself to ward off chaos. You notice the subtle ways your intentions shape your identity. You see how you define yourself by your desire to do good, how you cling to the image of yourself as a helper, a healer, a force for change. You realize that this identity can become a cage, trapping you in patterns of behavior that no longer serve you or others. You wonder who you would be if you let go of the need to be good, if you allowed yourself to act without the burden of expectation. You feel the tension between your inner world and the outer world, between your intentions and their consequences. You see how easily you can become lost in your own mind, mistaking your desires for reality, your hopes for truth. You realize that the only way to escape the trap is to see clearly, to accept the complexity of the world, to act with humility and awareness. You think of the stories that shape your culture, the hero's journey, the redemption arc, the triumph of good over evil. You see how these stories simplify reality, how they encourage you to believe in happy endings, in the power of intention, in the certainty of progress. You realize that real life is messier, more ambiguous, more tragic. You wonder if you are brave enough to face the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. You remember the words of Jung, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." You see that the journey is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole, about integrating your shadow, accepting your limitations, embracing your humanity. You realize that the only way to do good is to accept the possibility of doing harm, to act with awareness of your own fallibility. You feel the pull of the unknown, the sense that something vital is just beyond your grasp. You sense that the answer is not in your intentions, but in your willingness to learn, to adapt, to change. You realize that the only way to escape the trap is to let go of certainty, to embrace the mystery, to act with courage and humility. You wonder, what would it mean to act without attachment to outcome? To help without needing to be the hero? To love without needing to be loved in return? You sense that this is the path to freedom, the way out of the labyrinth, the key to the paradox. You look around and see the world anew. You see the beauty in imperfection, the wisdom in uncertainty, the possibility in every moment. You realize that the unseen consequences of your actions are not a curse but a call to awareness, a challenge to grow, an invitation to become more fully alive. You feel the urgency of the moment, the need to act, to choose, to risk. You realize that the only way to escape the trap is to step into the unknown, to trust in your own capacity for growth, for learning, for transformation. You sense that the journey is not about avoiding mistakes, but about learning from them, about becoming more resilient, more compassionate, more wise. You remember the words of Frankl, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." You see that the true test of your intentions is not in the outcomes you achieve, but in the person you become. You realize that the journey is not about controlling the world, but about transforming yourself, about becoming the kind of person who can face the world with courage, with humility, with love. You feel the tension ease, the sense of possibility expand. You realize that the unseen consequences of your actions are not a punishment, but a gift, a chance to grow, to learn, to become more fully human. You sense that the journey is just beginning, that the next step is waiting, that the breakthrough is near. You stand at the edge of a new understanding, the horizon shimmering with possibility. You sense that the answer is not in the world, but in yourself, in your willingness to see, to learn, to change. You realize that the only way to escape the trap is to become more aware, more compassionate, more courageous. The unseen consequences are all around you, shaping your life, your relationships, your world. Will you dare to face them? Will you risk everything for the chance to grow? The choice is yours, and the journey continues. The breakthrough is near, waiting for you to take the next step, to embrace the unknown, to become the person you were always meant to be. You stand at the threshold, the weight of unseen consequences pressing against your chest, the air thick with the residue of every intention gone awry. The world feels both familiar and alien, as if you are seeing it for the first time through eyes that have been stripped of illusion. The urge to retreat is strong, to return to the comfort of certainty, to the safety of old stories, to the warmth of good intentions unexamined. But something within you resists. A quiet rebellion stirs, a whisper that grows louder with each breath. There must be another way. You remember the moments when you glimpsed freedom, those rare electric instants when you acted not out of habit or fear or the need to be good, but from a place deeper, wilder, more authentic. You recall the exhilaration of breaking the script, of refusing the roles assigned to you by family, by society, by your own anxious mind. You sense that the path forward is not a return to innocence, but a leap into a new kind of awareness, a radical shift in perspective that challenges everything you thought you knew. You ask yourself, what if the only way to escape the trap is to question the very foundation of your intentions? What if the rebellion begins not with grand gestures, but with a single subversive act of honesty? You look in the mirror and see the complexity of your own face, the lines etched by laughter and grief, the shadows cast by doubt and desire. You realize that to break free, you must first tell the truth. Your intentions are never pure. Your knowledge is always incomplete. Your power is always limited. This is not a confession of failure, but a declaration of freedom. You see that humility is not the enemy of action, but its necessary companion. You remember the words of Socrates, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." You feel the paradox open before you, a space where certainty dissolves, where curiosity becomes your guide, where every action is an experiment, a question, a risk. You begin to practice a new kind of rebellion, the rebellion of awareness. You learn to pause before you act, to ask yourself not only what you want to achieve, but why you want it, what fears and hopes are driving you, what stories you are telling yourself. You learn to listen to the world, to others, to the quiet voice within that is so often drowned out by noise and urgency. You discover that true power lies not in control, but in presence, in the willingness to be with what is, to see clearly, to respond with care. You think of the Zen masters who speak of beginner's mind, the state of openness, of not knowing, of meeting each moment as if for the first time. You realize that this is the antidote to the arrogance of good intentions, the cure for the blindness of certainty. You practice letting go of your need to be right, your need to be seen as good, your need to fix everything. You discover the freedom of not knowing, the joy of learning, the peace of acceptance. You remember the stories of those who broke free, rebels, mystics, visionaries who refused to be defined by the expectations of their time. You think of Socrates, who questioned everything and drank the hemlock rather than betray his truth. You think of Siddhartha Gautama, who left behind a life of privilege to seek the end of suffering, who discovered that liberation lies not in changing the world, but in transforming the mind. You think of Viktor Frankl, who found meaning in the midst of horror, who taught that even in the darkest circumstances, you are free to choose your response. You see that rebellion is not always loud or violent. Sometimes it is as quiet as a breath, as subtle as a shift in attention, as gentle as a question. You learn to notice the small moments when you can choose differently, when you can listen instead of speak, ask instead of assume, wait instead of rush. You discover that every moment is an opportunity to break the cycle, to step out of the old patterns, to create something new. You begin to experiment with counterintuitive solutions. You notice that when you stop trying to fix others, they often find their own strength. When you let go of your need to be needed, your relationships become more honest, more equal, more alive. When you admit your mistakes, others feel safe to do the same. When you act with humility, you invite collaboration, creativity, and growth. You realize that the rebellion is not against the world, but against your own illusions, against the stories that keep you small, the fears that keep you silent, the habits that keep you asleep. You see that the true enemy is not outside, but within. The part of you that clings to certainty, that resists change, that fears the unknown. You remember the words of Rainer Maria Rilke, "The purpose of life is to be defeated by greater and greater things." You see that freedom is not the absence of struggle, but the willingness to engage with life fully, to be changed by what you encounter, to grow beyond your old self. You realize that every failure, every mistake, every unintended consequence is an invitation to learn, to adapt, to become more resilient. You begin to reclaim control, not by dominating the world, but by mastering yourself. You learn to notice your triggers, your biases, your blind spots. You practice self-compassion, knowing that growth is a process, that wisdom is born of error, that courage is the willingness to begin again. You discover that the most radical act is to stay awake, to keep questioning, to keep learning. You think of the great movements for change, moments in history when people broke free from the tyranny of old ideas, when they dared to imagine a different world. You remember the civil rights activists who faced violence with nonviolence, who refused to return hate for hate. You remember the artists and scientists who challenged the boundaries of their disciplines, who risked ridicule and failure for the sake of discovery. You see that every revolution begins with a single act of courage, a refusal to accept the world as it is, a willingness to dream of what could be. You realize that you are part of this lineage, that the rebellion is not only personal, but collective. You see that your willingness to question, to learn, to change, ripples outward, inspiring others to do the same. You sense that the world is hungry for this kind of courage, this kind of humility, this kind of presence. You begin to build a new way of thinking, one that honors complexity, that embraces uncertainty, that values growth over perfection. You learn to hold your intentions lightly, to act with care, to accept the limits of your knowledge. You discover that wisdom is not a destination, but a practice, a way of being in the world that is open, curious, and alive. You feel the power of this shift, a quiet, steady strength that grows with each act of awareness, each moment of honesty, each step into the unknown. You realize that the rebellion is not about escaping the consequences of your actions, but about facing them with courage, with humility, with love. You sense that you are not alone. All around you, others are waking up, questioning, learning, changing. You see the signs of a new consciousness emerging, a movement toward greater awareness, greater compassion, greater responsibility. You realize that the world is changing, not through grand gestures or heroic deeds, but through the quiet, persistent rebellion of those who refuse to sleepwalk through life. You stand at the edge of a new reality, the horizon shimmering with possibility. You sense that the journey is not about achieving certainty, but about embracing the mystery, about living with courage, about loving without guarantee. You realize that the only way to break free is to keep moving, to keep questioning, to keep growing. The rebellion has begun. The old stories are crumbling, the old certainties dissolving. A new way of being is emerging, one that honors both your desire to do good and your fear of doing harm. One that embraces both your light and your shadow, one that invites you to become more fully, more courageously, more compassionately human. You take a breath, feeling the power of this moment, the weight of possibility, the thrill of freedom. The journey is not over. The final, most powerful realization awaits, a truth that will redefine everything, that will illuminate the path ahead, that will call you to a new way of living, a new way of loving, a new way of being. Will you answer the call? Will you dare to discover the ultimate truth? The choice is yours, and the journey continues. You stand in the hush that follows rebellion, the world around you both familiar and utterly transformed. The air is charged with a strange electricity, as if the universe itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to see what has always been hidden in plain sight. You feel the pulse of your own heart, the echo of every question, every doubt, every act of courage that has brought you to this precipice. The journey has stripped you bare of illusions, of certainty, of the comforting stories you once clung to. Now in the silence, the ultimate truth begins to reveal itself. You realize, with a clarity that is both terrifying and liberating, that the world is not a puzzle to be solved, nor a problem to be fixed, nor a stage for your intentions to play out as you wish. The world is alive, wild, unpredictable, infinitely complex. It is not yours to control, not yours to save, not yours to perfect. The final, most powerful realization dawns. You are not the author of reality, but a participant in its unfolding, a single note in a symphony that began long before you and will continue long after. You see now that the desire to do good, to shape the world according to your vision, is both beautiful and dangerous. It is the spark that ignites revolutions, the force that heals wounds, the light that guides you through darkness. But it is also the root of suffering, the source of unintended harm, the shadow that follows every act of creation. The paradox is inescapable. To care is to risk, to act is to err, to love is to lose. There is no path that leads only to light, no choice that is free from consequence, no intention that is pure. You feel the weight of this truth settle into your bones, a gravity that is both humbling and profound. You remember the words of Rilke, "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going." No feeling is final. You see that the ultimate wisdom is not in avoiding pain, but in embracing the fullness of experience, in allowing yourself to be changed by what you encounter, in letting go of the need for certainty, in surrendering to the mystery. You realize that the only true freedom is the freedom to respond, to meet each moment as it comes, with openness, with humility, with courage. You are not here to save the world, but to bear witness to its beauty and its suffering, to participate in its unfolding with as much awareness and compassion as you can muster. You are not here to be perfect, but to be present, to love, to learn, to grow, to fail, to begin again. You see now that the ultimate truth is not a destination, but a way of being, a willingness to live in the tension between hope and despair, between action and acceptance. between the desire to do good and the humility to know you cannot control the outcome. It is the courage to act, knowing you will make mistakes. It is the grace to forgive yourself and others. It is the wisdom to let go when you must, and to hold on when you can. You remember the faces of those you have loved, the hands you have held, the hearts you have broken and mended. You see that every act of kindness, every moment of connection, every risk you have taken has shaped you, has woven you into the fabric of the world. You realize that your life is not measured by your intentions or your achievements, but by your willingness to show up, to care, to be changed. You feel the presence of those who have come before you. Thinkers, dreamers, rebels, saints. You sense their struggles, their doubts, their failures, and triumphs. You see that you are part of a lineage, a great river of humanity that flows through time, carrying the hopes and fears of countless generations. You realize that your story is not yours alone, but part of a larger story, a story of longing, of striving, of reaching for the light. You look back on the journey that has brought you here, the questions that haunted you, the paradoxes that confounded you, the moments of despair and revelation. You see that every step was necessary, that every mistake was a teacher, that every heartbreak was an opening. You realize that the journey itself is the answer, that the search for meaning is what gives life its depth, its beauty, its power. You stand at the edge of the world, the horizon ablaze with possibility. You feel the call to action, the urge to make a difference, to leave your mark, but you also feel the call to surrender, to let go, to trust in the unfolding of things. You realize that the ultimate truth is not either or, but both, and. You are called to act and to accept, to strive and to surrender, to care and to let go. You remember the words of Viktor Frankl, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." You see that the greatest power you possess is the power to choose your response, to meet each moment with awareness, with compassion, with courage. You realize that this is the heart of wisdom, to act with intention, but to release attachment to outcome, to love fiercely, but to accept loss, to hope bravely, but to face reality as it is. You feel the world open before you, vast and mysterious, filled with beauty and pain, joy and sorrow, hope and despair. You realize that to live is to risk, to care is to suffer, to act is to err. But you also see that to live is to love, to connect, to grow, to create. You realize that the ultimate truth is not in avoiding the darkness, but in embracing the whole, the light and the shadow, the joy and the grief, the certainty and the doubt. You stand in the center of your life, the world swirling around you, the future unknown. You feel the pulse of possibility, the ache of longing, the thrill of freedom. You realize that you are enough, not because you are perfect, but because you are present. Not because you have all the answers, but because you are willing to ask the questions. Not because you can save the world, but because you are willing to love it, to serve it, to be changed by it. You look into the eyes of a stranger and you see yourself. You feel the connection that binds all living things, the web of relationship that holds the world together. You realize that every act matters, that every choice ripples outward, that every moment is an opportunity to create meaning, to offer kindness, to bear witness. You remember the words of the poet, "We are all just walking each other home." You see that the journey is not about arriving, but about traveling together, about sharing the road, the burdens, the joys, the sorrows. You realize that the ultimate truth is not a solitary achievement, but a shared experience, a dance, a conversation, a song. You feel the world calling to you, inviting you to participate, to create, to love. You realize that the only way to honor your intentions is to act with awareness, to accept the consequences, to learn from your mistakes, to keep moving forward. You see that the journey never ends, that the questions never cease, that the mystery is never solved. You stand in the light of this realization, your heart open, your mind clear, your spirit alive. You feel the weight of the world, and you accept it. You feel the beauty of the world, and you celebrate it. You feel the pain of the world, and you embrace it. You realize that to be human is to live in the tension, to hold the paradox, to love without guarantee. You take a breath, and the world breathes with you. You step forward, and the path unfolds. You act, and the world responds. You love, and you are changed. The ultimate truth is this: you are not here to be perfect, but to be present. Not here to save the world, but to serve it. Not here to control, but to participate. Not here to avoid pain, but to embrace the fullness of life. You are here to love, to learn, to grow, to risk, to fail, to begin again. And as you walk into the unknown, the world opens before you. Vast, mysterious, alive. You are haunted, inspired, transformed. You are ready.